Mixing with Mike, plugin of the week is the Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor Class A. This is an adaptation that was made in 2012, a hardware adaptation that was done. Only 50 units were made. Essentially what they did is they went through the discrete section and made it all Class A components, rewired the original Shadow Hills compressor with fully with Megami cable. They changed the green lights to red lights and handpicked Lundell transformers to make sure everything was good on that end. And otherwise, you have all of the same features and functionality of the original. Just a few extra things that I want to kind of go over. And what I really want to do with this video is go through and do an A-B comparison up against the regular Shadow Hills non-Class A version, just so you can hear the difference and distinguish between the two. So one of the new things that they added in here from the previous version is a resize on the graphic user interface. You can go up to 150% or down to 50%. You got a hard bypass here, as you can see in the top right. Otherwise, most of the header is exactly the same. You have a drawer down here that you can open up, and this opens up a whole other section, including 20 variations of it. So the TMT technology. Also, you can do random channels with that. You can link parameters, which will link the left and right side. That doesn't happen by default. You could operate it in MS, which it doesn't do on its own. You have all the additional features. This one is a really great one, the headroom control, which allows you to drive more input while simultaneously dropping the output level. So that's a great way to, if you want to drive it a little bit harder, you can do it that way. There's a separate high-pass sidechain filter. There's one that's actually built in here, which is set to 90 hertz. So that's built in right up from this side, but you have this one in addition to that. And then you have some additional features that you see with most of the BrainWorks plugins, the mono maker, stereo width control, and then you have parallel mix. So other than that, the rest of the functionality is the same. You have the hardware bypass, which is right here. So that will bypass everything going all the way through. Otherwise, if you take the optical section out and the discrete section out, you will still pass through the transformer. So there are three basic transformers that are here. Nickel, which is probably the most flat frequency response, got a little lift around 10K. You have the iron, which is a little bit more colored, has a little bump around 100 hertz. And then you have the steel, which is probably the most colored of the three. When I say colored, it's just like a harmonic distortion kind of thing. You just have to listen to the characteristic sound that it adds on to the master or whatever it is that you're applying it for the mix and see which of the three that you like. I don't know that there's rhyme or reason necessarily to it other than the results that you hear. And we'll go through a little bit of this. And this has a lift at around 40 hertz, a little bit of a lift. They're talking like a dB, not a major thing. Other than that, you have an optical section here. The optical section is more or less modeled after the LA2A. It uses the same T4B optical attenuator circuit. You could pop it in right here. You have makeup gain and threshold. It's a two-stage release circuit. So you have an initial recovery, which is about 80% recovery, and then the remaining, the remainder of the gain reduction or recovery happens, is like the last 20%. And then you have the discrete section here, which is a feed-forward VCA-style compressor. You'll see very similar settings to what you see like on the SSL bus compressor. They just seem to work, I guess. So you can pop that into circuit here. You have attack, threshold, recovery. It also has a dual recovery mode here, which operates in a similar way to what the dual stage recovery is on the optical section. Same basic concept. And then you have the ratio, which goes from 1.2 all the way up to flood, which is basically 20:1. And then you have makeup gain here. And pretty much you just bypass in and out and see what it is that you like. In terms of the approach, the way I've generally approached this is I start with the circuits out, and then I run signal through it, go through the three transformer sections, see which one I like best, and then start to apply the optical and discrete, see if I like one, the other, or both combined. They operate in series, so one comes, go through the optical section first, into the discrete section second. In terms of the metering, the only other thing we need to go about over here, a couple things. One, you can operate it in dual mono mode or in stereo mode. So in dual mono mode, you'll have separate control over the left-right settings, unless you hit the MS button, in which case it'll be mid and side control. If you operate it in stereo, it will lock them together. Now, normally, the controls won't lock. It'll just slave to whatever the settings are on the left side. But if you hit the parameter link, then one will affect the other. So when you change one, it will change both sides. So that's kind of a nifty feature that they added in there. Because you may want to set it up this way and then just do in left, right, and just kind of do a quick comparison to see if that gives you a little bit more width when you pop it in that way. So it's also kind of a cool feature that they've added in. Yeah, let's do it. Let's go get right to it. Make some noise here. This is on the mix bus. I'm actually going to take this off for a second. And what I did here was I kind of went through and did some basic things with different elements. I stemmed down a mix into 4 basic things: bass, drums, guitars, and keys, and kind of went through. So just want to do a little comparison just so you can kind of hear what this sounds like with drums. So we'll start with it hardware bypassed, and then we'll pop it in and out. So I'm using both the optical section and the discrete section here. With the optical section, pretty straight ahead, just giving a little bit of movement there, a little bit of gain reduction, not a lot. With this, you don't really need a lot. I always think of this because it's a mastering compressor. I kind of think of using it that way. And I guess you could experiment and really get into, especially with the headroom control, really driving and then using it in parallel. It certainly can do that, and you get some great things out of it with the with the transformer circuit, excuse me, and then working, get some aggressive compression here. I work with I always liked 4-to-1, whatever, with VCA compressors. I don't know why that is. And this is just kind of a quick pump and breathe kind of thing with the, 30 millisecond attack and 100 millisecond release. And it just always seems to, I don't know, just great. It's a couple dB of gain reduction, just kind of get the track to kind of breathe a little bit, pump and breathe a little bit. And then I ended up with the nickel setting. So I just want to kind of go through those 3 settings real quick. So you could hear the settings here, how that gives you more presence and brightness. This kind of gives you a bit more body and grit, and this kind of gives you a little bit more low-end energy. I think I ended up on the nickel here just for the presence. I also duplicated the circuit here with the original version here. So let me just kind of go back here, make the GUIs the same size. And let's just do a comparison. So these would be the identical settings on both. So I'm sorry, this is the new one on top, and this is the old one, the original version on the bottom here. So instantly, what I hear is much more clarity and on the imaging characteristics of it. So I've never compared I've worked on the original Shadow Hills mastering compressor. I've never seen or worked on the updated one, the Class A version, and so I know what it sounds like. And to compare the two of them, I'd have to compare the two hardware versions to decide to say, like, okay, yes, this makes sense or this is right. And also I tried to match the settings up as best as I could. Now, some of the gain settings and threshold settings ended up being slightly different. So I was going by the meters just to make sure that I would match up the gain reduction settings. But that's basically where I ended up with this. Now, let's just go over something here real quick, like with the bass. So I'll just add the bass part in, because I did a similar kind of thing here. Let's just show you what that's all about. So here, primarily what I was looking for was the optical, but I went to the dual release, lower threshold, okay, slow attack, but a very light ratio. So essentially this is kind of just gluing the track together. And then if you sync the threshold down lower, get a couple dB of gain reduction, it's sort of like a way of lifting the RMS energy out of the bass. So I ended up going with the iron setting here because you could hear how it just focuses the mid-range of that. Just makes it just come through so clearly. So I wanted to compare that so we could just hear that up against the original, just so you could see. So again, same settings in terms of attack and release times and all of the other sort of stuff. The threshold and gain settings may be slightly different because they didn't seem to match up. So I tried to gain match them as best I could by ear and go by the gain reduction meters for matching up the gain. So those, if you see variances, that's what it is. All right. You could hear, again, just how much more open the Class A version is. So let's add in the instruments and vocals. So here on the instruments, kind of a similar thing that I did with the bass in terms of, except I have a faster recovery, faster attack time, but again with the light ratio and the low threshold. So you'll see a couple dB of gain reduction pretty consistently in here. And then again, usually I've tended to always like to use optical compressors with just a little bit of gain reduction. Sometimes it works really well with vocals when you have a lot of gain reduction on them, especially with like an LA2A. I haven't found as good of similar results since I mostly use this more in a mastering situation, and haven't experimented as much of that with lead vocals, but that would be something that would be worth looking at. Here I went to the steel just to get a little bit more body, a little bit of a low-end lift out of the main instruments. And then what I did here, just so you get an idea then. So again, you hear the same kind of things that it does in terms of bringing clarity and focus to the individual instruments. So here, same kind of thing. Let's do a comparison here. This doesn't look like it's giving me as much gain reduction. feel like you can just kind of see right in between everything with the Class A version there in a way that you don't really with the other. So let's just put everything in here. Okay, so finally, let's bring in the vocal here. I'll just kind of do that, bring that in independently, just so you kind of get an overall idea of what this is about. Here, went to a 6-to-1 ratio, so a little bit more aggressive, but with a slow attack and a fast release. The idea here just to kind of get the vocal to kind of, pump and breathe it a bit, to kind of make it draw it out, especially some of the, this kind of effect works really well, especially if you want to draw the back end of phrases and words out a little bit more to kind of make it come forward a little bit. And then this is a pretty low threshold, so maybe the stem just kind of was recorded at a lower level, but a pretty low threshold here. Still not a ton of gain reduction here, but let's just kind of hear the effect of this here.
And earthly treasures had me bound, and they always tear me down. And in the shelter of your arms, you'll always find me there. I cast my cares, I find you there. In the river, and I cast my cares, I find you there. In the river, oh, in the shadow of the cross, where my strength comes from. Oh, now I'm free indeed. I'm living in freedom. Oh.
You hear how it kind of lifts some of the boxiness of the vocal out from there. And so let's hear the whole thing in context here. I'll kind of lift the whole, put the GUI back to normal here, put all of these guys on, and let's just listen to the whole thing.
Earthly treasures had me bound, and they always tear me down. And in the shelter of your arms, you'll always find me there. I cast my cares, I find you there. In the river, and I cast my cares, I find you there. In the river, oh, in the shadow of the cross, where my strength comes from. Oh, now I'm free indeed. I'm living in freedom. Oh, I cast my cares, I find you there. In the river, and I cast my cares, I find you there. In the river.
I just find it amazing, like how much more open and clear the Class A version is. There's like a bit more grit and guts out of the original version. But in terms of like a mastering compressor, choosing between the two, I would absolutely choose this over the other. And maybe if you're looking for just getting a little bit more nasty, maybe going back to the original version might be a good option there. You can hear how it has a lot more grit, especially in the mid-range. But this is just sheer, open, clear, beautiful character. So another great job by Brainworks. They always do great emulations. Love this stuff. This was a completely unexpected surprise and a great addition to the collection from the Plugin Alliance. So there you have it. Plugin of the week from Plugin Alliance. Shadow Hills Mastering Compressor Class A.